My sister had always believed I was the poor failure in our family, so when she saw the $5 million check in my hands, she tore it up in front of my son and accused me of fraud. But just as security surrounded us, her CEO walked in and called me Colonel Price. What secret made all the color drain from her face? The sound of my sister tearing a $5 million check in half was quieter than I expected. But to my son, standing beside me with both hands wrapped around my sleeve, it sounded like something in our family had broken for good. She tore it once. Then she folded the pieces and tore them again. White paper drifted onto the polished floor, onto my old boots, and across my son's worn backpack. He stared at the pieces without moving. He did not understand what $5 million could build. But he understood humiliation. Children always do. My sister held the last piece between two fingers and looked at me as though she had finally proven something. Call the police. She's trying to pass a fake check. She did not call me her sister. She used my first name, loud enough for the customers behind us to hear. In that moment, blood became inconvenient to her. Authority mattered more. A man near the coffee station lifted his phone and began recording. A woman with a leather handbag stepped away from me, pulling her purse closer as if I had entered the bank to rob it. Behind the counter, a chair scraped across the floor. My son tightened his grip on my sleeve. Mom? I covered his hand with mine. Stay close. I did not reach for the torn check. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. Instead, I looked up. The camera above the teller counter had a small red light beside the lens. It was still recording. The digital clock on the far wall read 3:29. Two customers stood close enough to hear every word. The young teller who had scanned the check was still behind the counter, pale and frightened, but watching. People often mistake silence for surrender. They rarely consider that a quiet person may simply be counting witnesses, watching cameras, and waiting for everyone else to finish making their mistakes. My sister pointed toward the lobby. Security. Keep her here until the police arrive. The first guard started toward us. His shoes struck the marble in slow, heavy beats. My son moved behind my hip and I felt his shoulders shaking. I kept one hand on him and raised my eyes toward the camera. Make sure that camera keeps recording. My sister's smile tightened. You think a camera is going to help you? I did not answer. The glass doors opened with a soft mechanical hiss. 4 people entered together, 3 carried dark folders. The man in front wore a charcoal suit and walked with the purpose of someone arriving for a scheduled meeting. Then he saw the torn paper, he saw my son crying, he saw the guard moving toward us, and he saw my sister pointing at me as though I were a criminal. He stopped. The people behind him stopped, too. His professional smile disappeared. The color left his face. He looked directly at me. Colonel Price? The lobby went still. The guard's next step never landed. My sister's hand slowly dropped to her side. Even the man recording near the coffee station lowered his phone. My sister had spent years convincing herself that I was the failure in our family. In the next few minutes, she was going to learn what happens when prejudice becomes evidence. But 25 minutes earlier, my son and I had walked into that bank expecting nothing more dramatic than paperwork and an early dinner. 25 minutes earlier, my son was asking whether we had enough time to visit the comic book store after my meeting. Neither of us knew that the woman waiting inside the bank had already decided what kind of people we were. My son was still talking about the comic book when I pulled my old pickup into the bank's visitor parking lot. The branch sat in one of those polished Northern Virginia business districts where almost every car looked newer than mine. Black SUVs filled the front row. Electric sedans waited near charging stations. Brass signs marked spaces for private clients. My truck looked out of place. The paint had faded along the hood, red dust clung to the wheel wells, and a long scratch crossed the passenger door. I had never been embarrassed by it. That truck had carried us through 3 duty stations, 2 bad winters, 1 divorce, and more early morning drives to military bases than I could count. It started every time I turned the key. That mattered more than the logo on the grill. My son unbuckled and pulled his worn backpack onto his lap. One zipper had been repaired with a metal ring, and a friend had drawn a crooked superhero across the front. "How long is the meeting?" he asked. "An hour, if everyone comes prepared. And if they don't, then we may be here until breakfast." He laughed and asked whether breakfast meant burgers. I told him no, but if the meeting ended on time, we could visit the comic book store and get burgers afterward. That was the plan. Paperwork, a meeting, comic books, dinner. Nothing about the afternoon was supposed to become a test of who deserved dignity. I had come straight from a training session on support services for military families. There had been no time to change after picking up my son from school. The jacket I wore was old field gear, not a dress uniform. There were no medals across my chest, nothing meant to announce rank. The sleeves had faded. The cuffs were soft from years of use. I had worn that jacket overseas, on cold training grounds, and through more quiet drives home than I remembered. I was not wearing it to test anyone. I was wearing it because it was mine. The envelope inside my bag held a certified cashier's check for $5 million. The money did not belong to me. It came from a military charity, veterans, and several defense contractors. It would become the starting fund for scholarships, grief counseling, and emergency housing for children whose parents had died while serving. $5 million sounds like personal wealth when someone says it out loud. On paper, it was responsibility, it was college tuition, it was counseling after a funeral, it was a safe apartment for a family with nowhere else to go. People saw a number on a check and imagined luxury. I saw names on scholarship applications and children whose parents would never come home. I had been authorized to open the account. The packet included the issuing bank's confirmation letter, the trust documents, my authorization, legal contact information, and the transaction notice already sent to the branch. The bank's legal department had cleared the check that morning. All anyone needed to do was open the file and read. My 3:30 meeting was separate from the deposit. The bank's chief executive wanted to discuss whether his company could manage part of a federal support program for service members and veterans. My team was reviewing customer service, data security, complaint handling, and protections against discrimination. This branch had been selected because it was considered one of the bank's strongest locations. I arrived 25 minutes early to open the fund account before the meeting. I knew my sister managed the branch. I did not know whether she would be there. The chief executive had chosen the location because of its performance records, not because of our family connection. My sister and I had not spoken in years. I had never explained the full history to my son. Children should not have to carry adult grudges. As we crossed the parking lot, he looked up at the brass nameplate beside the entrance. The branch manager's name was printed beneath the bank logo. He slowed down. "Is that Aunt Natalie?" I stopped for one breath. "Yes, but today she's the branch manager, and I'm a client. That should be enough." I believed professionalism could hold where family had failed. The moment we walked through those glass doors, I realized how badly I had miscalculated. The moment we stepped through the glass doors, the room seemed to sort us before anyone said a word. The receptionist glanced at my jacket, then at my son's backpack. Her eyes moved past us and her fingers returned to the keyboard. I waited for her to ask whether we had an appointment. She did not. A man in a navy suit entered behind us. Before he reached the desk, the receptionist smiled and greeted him by name. Someone brought him coffee. A woman carrying a designer handbag arrived a minute later and was led toward a private office. My son and I remained near the counter. A teller pushed a standard deposit slip toward me before I had finished explaining why I was there. "Someone will be with you shortly," she said. Her tone was polite. That was the clever part. Prejudice does not always arrive as an insult. Sometimes it appears as a delay, a missing smile, or a question no one bothers to ask. I set the slip back on the counter. "I have an appointment," I said. The teller nodded, but she did not check the schedule. Near the entrance, the security guard kept looking at my son's backpack, not at my face, not at the documents in my hand, at the backpack. My son noticed. He shifted it behind his leg. 10 minutes passed. The woman with the expensive handbag had disappeared behind frosted glass. 2 customers who arrived after us were already being helped. My son moved closer until his shoulder pressed against my arm. Then he tugged at my sleeve. Mom, is it because of what we're wearing? That question hurt more than anything the employees had done to me. I lowered myself until we were eye to eye. No, I said. And even if it is, that says something about them, not us. I brought his backpack back around to the front. You do not have to hide this. He looked at the faded drawing on the fabric. It looks old. It is old, I said. That does not make it shameful. Adults like to believe children are too young to notice prejudice. They notice it before they know the word for it. What they do not know is where to place the blame, so they often place it on themselves. They think the shirt is wrong, the backpack is wrong, the family is wrong. They think kindness must be earned by looking like someone else. I had been judged before. In uniform, out of uniform, as a woman, as a single mother. I could carry that. What I could not accept was watching my son search himself for a fault that did not exist. I stood and looked around the lobby more carefully. The clock above the teller stations read 3:17. I noted the customers who had arrived after us. I read the names on the employees' badges. I found the cameras above the counter and near the entrance. Would you please confirm my 3:30 appointment is in your system? The receptionist sighed and turned to the schedule. Her expression changed. Her eyes moved from the screen to me, then back again. Whatever she saw made her sit straighter. She opened her mouth to speak. Before she could, the manager's door opened. My sister stepped into the lobby. She looked at me first, then at my son, then at the faded jacket she had mocked for years. There was no welcome in her face, only the cold calculation of someone deciding how much embarrassment my presence might cause her. The first words she spoke were not hello. What are you doing here? Before I tell you what my sister did when she saw the check, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from and what time is it there? I always find it incredible how far one story can travel. The last time my sister had looked at me that way, she had been standing in our parents' kitchen telling me that choosing service over money would ruin my life. We did not grow up poor enough to miss meals, but money was always present. It lived in the envelopes on the counter, in the arguments behind closed doors, and in the way our mother saved grocery receipts as if they might defend her in court. Most of our clothes came from cousins. Vacations meant driving somewhere close enough to return before dark. My sister hated that feeling. When families with larger houses invited her over, she came home quieter. She noticed their new cars and the way no one lowered their voice when a bill arrived. Somewhere along the way, she decided admiration meant safety. I chose something different. Discipline made more sense to me than appearances. Rules were clear, effort mattered. When I joined the military, I found stability in responsibility. My sister never understood that. In the beginning, we still called each other. When I earned a promotion, she reminded me that I was still working for the government. When I moved to another duty station, she said real success did not require packing every few years. She measured every life by income, address, and who noticed when you entered a room. After my marriage ended, the distance between us became permanent. She sided with my former husband. She said I had chosen duty over family. After that, I stopped explaining myself. I did not tell her where I worked in detail. I did not mention every promotion. I left out the sensitive assignments and my role in programs supporting military families. She knew I still served. She assumed I had settled into an ordinary administrative position with an ordinary paycheck. I let her assume it. Standing in the bank, I saw the same old judgment settle across her face. She did not hug me. She did not greet my son. She walked toward us as though we did not belong. What are you doing here? I have an appointment. She glanced toward the lobby. With whom? The bank. I did not want to argue about our family in front of my son. He had already heard enough in her tone. Her attention shifted to the document envelope in my hand. She asked what it was. I told her I needed to open an account for an approved charitable fund. The teller placed the packet on the counter. I removed the certified cashier's check and set it beside the supporting documents. My sister looked at the number first. $5 million. For 1 second, she said nothing, Then she looked at me. Where did you get this? It was not a professional question. It was an accusation wearing one. I pointed to the packet. The issuing information is inside. The check was cleared this morning. She looked around the lobby before looking back at the document. 2 customers were close enough to hear. I placed my identification on the counter. Beside it, I laid out the fund authorization, the confirmation letter, the legal contact number, the issuing bank information, and the record of my scheduled meeting. There was no mystery left to solve. Verify the routing number. Call the issuing bank. Follow your own policy. She turned one page, then another. She did not read either one. Anyone can print letterhead. That was the moment reasonable suspicion ended. My sister did not need proof that the check was fake. She needed the check to be fake. If it was real, then she had spent years being wrong about me, and her pride could not survive that correction in front of an audience. She stepped behind the counter and told the staff not to process anything. Then she motioned to the security guard. Her voice grew louder. She referred to me as this woman, not as her sister, not even as a customer. I had believed professionalism might hold where family had failed. Instead, she was using the bank's authority to continue a private punishment she had begun years earlier. A young teller looked from the documents to my sister. She hesitated, then moved closer. I think we should verify this before taking any further action. My sister turned toward her so quickly that the young woman stopped mid-step. Until that moment, everyone behind the counter had chosen silence. Then one young employee decided to risk speaking, and my sister made sure the entire room saw the price of courage. The teller was younger than the others. She did not look at my jacket or my son's backpack. She looked at the documents. Her eyes moved from the name of the fund to the payee line on the check. She checked the routing number, the security marks, and the reference code on the confirmation letter. Then she glanced at the appointment schedule on her screen. The verification reference matches the appointment notes. I can call the issuing bank. For the first time since we entered, someone was doing what the situation required. She reached for the check before my sister could stop her and placed it into the scanner beneath the counter. The machine made a soft sound as it pulled the paper through. An image appeared on the monitor, front and back. The system added the time, the transaction number, and the employee account that had created the record. The teller typed a brief note stating that verification had been requested. My sister moved closer. "What are you doing?" The teller explained that she was following the bank's intake procedure. My sister took her by the elbow and pulled her a few steps away. She lowered her voice, but the lobby had grown quiet enough for me to hear every word. "Go back to your station unless you want this to be your last shift." The young woman's face changed. Later, I learned that she was still paying student loans. She lived alone, had little saved, and had watched my sister push another employee out after a disagreement. In that moment, I only saw fear move through her body. "I'm only following procedure," she said. My sister leaned closer. "I decide the procedure in this branch." The teller looked toward the floor. Her hands were shaking when she stepped away. But before she did, I saw her press one key and watch the word "saved" appear on the screen. It was a small action. It was also the reason the truth would survive what happened next. Courage is rarely a person standing without fear. More often, it is a frightened person doing one useful thing before fear forces them back. I could have asked her to stay. I could have told her to repeat what she had seen in front of everyone, but that would have placed her job, her rent, and whatever security she had left directly in the path of my sister's anger. So I did not pull her back into the fight. "You did what policy required. Thank you." The teller gave me the smallest nod. My sister heard me. Her jaw tightened. My words had made the difference between proper procedure and personal power visible to everyone nearby. A customer near the waiting area raised his phone. Another woman began recording beside the coffee station. Someone behind us whispered that the bank should verify the check before involving security. My sister looked toward the phones. Then she looked at the documents. The room had become an audience, and she understood that a simple call could end the argument. It could also force her to admit in front of everyone that she had judged me before reading a single page. She chose pride. "This isn't a banking error," she said. "This is attempted fraud." My son moved closer to me. I placed one hand on his shoulder and pushed the packet across the counter with the other. "Call the issuing bank. 2 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I did not mention my rank. I did not threaten the bank's contract. I did not tell her who was scheduled to arrive. I gave her the easiest way out. Verify the check. Follow the record. Correct the mistake before it became something worse. My sister stared at the phone beside her. Then she looked at the customers recording her. She picked up the check instead. A slow smile crossed her face. "Fine. Let's show everyone what this is worth." I knew that expression. My sister was no longer making a banking decision. She was performing for an audience, and people are most dangerous when they would rather destroy evidence than admit they were wrong. For several seconds, no one moved. My sister held the check at chest level, one hand at each end. The phone beside her sat untouched. The confirmation packet remained open on the counter. The pre-clearance notice was still visible on the first page. She had every way out in front of her. She could have read the file. She could have called the issuing bank. She could have checked the reference number already stored in the system. She could have waited for the meeting scheduled less than 15 minutes away. Instead, she looked at the phones pointed toward her. Backing down would have required her to admit that she had judged me before checking a single fact. In private, she might have found a way to live with that. In front of an audience, pride made the decision for her. She raised the check so everyone could see the amount. A check this size does not make it real. I kept my voice even. Neither does tearing it make you right. Her fingers tightened. Then she tore it. The sound was small, dry, almost ordinary. She folded the two pieces together and tore them again. That second tear mattered. The first could have been explained as anger. The second made it deliberate. The pieces slipped from her hands and scattered across the marble floor. I knew the money had not vanished. The issuing bank could stop payment and replace the check. The digital image was already stored. The fund would survive. But the moment itself could not be replaced. My son had just watched an adult destroy something because telling the truth would have cost her pride. He stared at the paper near his shoes. Then he dropped to his knees. "Mom, I can fix it." He began gathering the pieces with both hands. He tried to match one torn edge to another, as if enough care could undo what had happened. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "No, leave it." He looked up at me, frightened and confused. "But it is $5 million. It is paper." I helped him to his feet. "You never kneel to someone who is trying to humiliate you. Stand up." He pressed the pieces against his chest for a moment before letting them fall. Then he moved close enough that his shoulder touched my side. Until then, some part of me had still hoped my sister would stop. Not because she cared about me, but because most people recognize a final line before they cross it. She had crossed hers. That was the moment I stopped trying to save my sister from the consequences of her choices. I did not want revenge. I wanted a complete record. I wanted the young teller protected. I wanted my son to see that truth could win without turning his mother into someone cruel. My sister turned toward the staff. "Call the police. Tell them we have an attempted fraud and an aggressive suspect." The teller at the phone hesitated. I looked directly at the camera above the counter. "Tell them the client is unarmed, has provided identification, and has requested verification." A woman near the waiting area finally asked why no one had called the issuing bank. Another customer lowered his phone. The man near the coffee station kept recording, leaning closer for a better angle. No one stepped beside us. That was the part I would remember later. People had begun to understand that something was wrong, but understanding and courage are not the same thing. My sister motioned toward the head of security. "Detain her until the police arrive." He was a broad man with a heavy belt and a tired expression. He had not seen the beginning. He had heard one version from the person who signed his checks. "You have no evidence of a crime," I said. His eyes passed over the documents on the counter, but he did not read them. One hand settled near the cuffs on his belt. "Ma'am, step away from the counter." I moved my son behind me. "My son stays with me." The guard came closer. My son gripped the back of my jacket with both hands. I watched the space between the guard's hand and my child's shoulder disappear. I could tolerate what they said about me, I could wait for the truth to catch up, but when the guard reached past me and put his hand on my son, waiting was no longer an option. The guard's fingers closed around my son's upper arm. My body moved before anger had time to become a thought. He tried to pull my son out from behind me, his grip tightened, my son lost his balance, and his shoulder struck the edge of the counter. "Mom." That single word cut through everything. I removed the guard's hand from my child, turned his wrist outward, and guided his arm onto the counter. I used my weight to keep him still. He tried to pull away, but I held him only long enough to move my son out of reach. Then I let go. "Do not touch my son again." I stepped back twice. I placed my son behind me and raised both hands where the cameras could see them. "I'm not resisting." He put his hands on my child. The guard rubbed his wrist. He was embarrassed but not injured. I had not hit him. The moment the threat ended, so did my response. My sister never asked whether her nephew was hurt. She turned toward the phones. "You all saw that. She attacked security." I reminded her that the guard had grabbed my son. She ignored me and moved closer to the employee speaking with the emergency operator. She said I had returned from military service unstable. She said I had anger problems. Then she added the most dangerous lie of all. I could be armed. She knew I was not. My identification and documents were on the counter. My hands were raised. My son was crying beside me. None of that mattered to her. Tell them she's military trained and violent. I spoke loudly enough for the call to record every word. Tell them I am unarmed, my hands are visible, and your guard grabbed a 10-year-old child. There's a special kind of cruelty in using a veteran's training against her. People praise discipline when it protects them. Then they call that same discipline dangerous when the veteran refuses to be controlled. 2 more guards approached. One blocked the glass doors. The other ordered me to kneel with my hands behind my head. I kept my palms open. "I will remain where the cameras can see me. I will not kneel, and I will not be separated from my child." My sister told them to take my son into a private office for his own protection. He wrapped both arms around my waist. "Don't let them take me." I felt his breath shaking against my jacket. The lobby was full of people. Any one of them could have asked the guards to step back. Any one of them could have stood near a frightened child. No one did. Some kept recording his face. One customer told me to cooperate, even though he had arrived after the check was on the counter. Another whispered that this had gone too far, but remained where she was. Behind the counter, the young teller caught my eye. She pointed toward the camera, then rested her hand on the computer monitor. The record was still there. Crowds rarely think of themselves as cruel. Each person tells himself he is only watching, but when everyone chooses to watch, cruelty needs only one aggressor and a room full of permission. My son looked up at me. Tears had left 2 clean lines down his cheeks. "You serve this country. Why are they treating you like you don't matter?" For one moment, the room seemed farther away. I lowered myself slightly, but kept my eyes on the guards. My rank isn't the reason I matter. Neither is that check. They should have treated us with dignity before they knew anything about me. The question broke something in me, not because I lacked an answer, but because my son had learned so early that some people offer dignity only after they discover what you can do for them. One guard stepped closer. Behind me, the glass doors began to open. I heard a man speaking to the people beside him. "We're already late. Colonel Price should be here." My sister did not hear him. She was still pointing at me. "Get her on the floor before the police arrive." I turned toward the entrance. If you're still listening, please tell me in the comments how satisfied you are with the story so far. It helps me know there are still people walking beside me through this journey. Your presence is the greatest encouragement I have as I continue toward the final part. Then the man at the entrance saw the torn check, my son's bruised arm, and the guards surrounding me. His face changed before he said the 2 words my sister had never expected to hear. Colonel Price? The words came from the man at the entrance. He had arrived with the bank's general counsel, the compliance director, an assistant carrying the meeting files, and 2 members of the team assigned to the military program. All 5 of them stopped when they saw the lobby. The chief executive looked first at me, then at my son's bruised arm. His eyes moved to the torn check on the floor and the guards standing around us. Everyone step away from her. Now. The order was quiet, but no one mistook it for a suggestion. The guards backed away. I kept my hands raised. I did not move toward the chief executive. I did not ask him to defend me. A title could change the way people listen, but it could not replace a clean record of what had happened. Before anyone explains anything, preserve the security footage and the transaction record. He turned to the compliance director. Lock the system logs. Secure every camera angle. No one deletes or edits anything. Then he told the staff to stop accessing the transaction. He ordered the guards away from my son and asked for medical help to examine his shoulder and arm. No one was to leave until the police completed their first interviews. My sister stepped forward before anyone could question her. She told him she had stopped a fraudulent transaction and that I had attacked a security officer. The chief executive looked at the torn paper. Did you verify the check? She said the circumstances had been suspicious. Did you call the issuing bank? She did not answer. Did you check the pre-clearance memo from legal? My sister claimed she had never seen it. The chief executive's face hardened. It was sent to this branch at 9:12 this morning. Each question removed another place for her to hide. He explained that the check had been cleared by the bank's legal department. The funds were legitimate, the deposit had been scheduled, the account documents had already been reviewed. The young teller spoke from behind the counter. Her voice shook, but she said she had scanned the check before my sister destroyed it. The chief executive asked who had ordered her to stop the verification. No one answered. No one needed to. Every face turned toward my sister. The chief executive did not reveal private details about my work. He said only that I led the review team for a financial program serving military members, veterans, and their families. His bank was being considered for the final stage of selection. Our meeting that afternoon was supposed to examine customer service, compliance, data protection, and the bank's treatment of vulnerable clients. My report would carry weight, though the decision did not belong to me alone. The phones around the lobby began to lower. People avoided my eyes. One man erased something from his screen. Another customer whispered that he had not known the whole story. That explanation did not comfort me. They were embarrassed because they had misjudged a colonel. What troubled me was that very few seemed embarrassed for mistreating a mother and child before they knew the title. My rank had not made my son's bruise more painful. It had not made the guard's grip more wrong. It had only made powerful people afraid of the consequences. It should never have taken a title to make them notice what basic decency should have made obvious from the start. The chief executive faced me. Colonel, I am deeply sorry. I lowered my hands only after the guards had moved away. My son needs medical attention. Your employee needs protection from retaliation. Your apology can wait until we understand exactly what happened. He nodded once. The compliance director went to the teller's computer and opened the saved transaction. The scanned image appeared with the time, the reference number, and the employee record. Beneath it was a note the young teller had entered before stepping away. Manager refused verification and ordered escalation. The room became silent again. My sister had destroyed the paper in her hand. She had forgotten that modern institutions leave fingerprints in places pride cannot reach. The police arrived less than 10 minutes later. Because of the emergency call, they entered carefully. Their hands stayed near their equipment, and their eyes moved through the lobby before settling on me. I kept my palms open. I am unarmed. My son stays with me. The cameras recorded everything. One officer nodded. We're going to separate everyone and review the footage. That's exactly what should happen. I did not mention my rank or ask for special treatment. By then, I wanted only one thing from the process: accuracy. The officers placed us in different areas of the branch. One stayed with my son and me, while another spoke with my sister. A third collected video from customers who had recorded the scene. The compliance director opened the security files. The cameras showed everything. They showed me presenting the documents, asking for verification, and watching the young teller scan the check. They showed my sister stopping the process. They showed her tearing the check and calling security. Then the video showed the guard pulling my son off balance and driving his shoulder into the counter. It showed me removing the guard's hand, controlling his wrist, and releasing him as soon as my child was clear. It showed me stepping back. It showed my hands raised. It showed my sister continuing to call me violent after the danger had ended. No one needed to explain the footage. The images did not defend themselves. They simply remained exactly what they were. The emergency call was worse. An officer played the recording through a speaker. My sister's voice came through clearly. She may be armed. The dispatcher asked whether anyone had seen a weapon. My sister answered, "No, but she's military." The room seemed to tighten around those words. A false description on an emergency call is not just a lie. It changes how armed strangers enter a room. My sister had not merely insulted me. She had tried to make fear arrive before the facts. The young teller gave her statement next. She explained that the payee name matched the fund documents. The pre-clearance reference was already in the system. She had offered to call the issuing bank, but my sister stopped her. She also admitted that she had been threatened with losing her job. Her voice shook. She kept going. She told the officers why she saved the note. The situation had felt wrong, and she wanted the record to show that verification had been requested and refused. Sometimes courage is not speaking before fear arrives. Sometimes it is telling the truth after fear has already taken away everything comfortable. The head of security was interviewed near the entrance. At first, he said I had attacked without warning. Then the officer replayed the angle showing his hand on my son. His shoulders dropped. I was following the manager's instructions. The officer looked at him. An instruction does not remove your responsibility for how you carry it out. No one was arrested in the lobby. The officers documented the scene, photographed my son's bruises, and collected the footage, transaction record, customer videos, and emergency call. They opened a report on the destroyed check and said the full file would be reviewed by investigators and prosecutors. The chief executive suspended my sister and the security chief before the first interviews ended. Their badges were collected. Their system access was shut down. When my sister handed over her manager card, she looked at me. For the first time that day, she used my name like family instead of evidence. "Lauren, please, tell them this was a family misunderstanding. You stopped treating it like a family matter when you used the bank, security, and the police against me." I said nothing else. She was taken into a private office to finish her statement. My son watched the door close. "Is she going to jail?" "I don't know. Evidence decides what happens next, not anger." He nodded, though I could tell he wanted a simpler answer. Justice rarely arrives as one clean moment. Sometimes it begins with timestamps, saved files, careful statements, and people finally accepting responsibility for what they chose to do. As we prepared to leave, the compliance director pulled the chief executive aside. She spoke quietly, but I heard enough. This was not the first complaint involving my sister. What happened to us had taken less than an hour. The records waiting in the bank's compliance office showed that the problem had been growing for years. At first, the video spread slowly. A few thousand people watched it. Then, a retired Marine with a large online following shared it, and the numbers climbed. A local reporter contacted me. Military family groups asked the bank for an explanation. National outlets paid attention only after former employees and past customers began telling their own stories. The bank's stock did not collapse overnight. It slipped over several trading sessions. Some customers announced they were moving their accounts. The board called an emergency meeting. The federal program review was paused, and regulators requested years of complaint records. That was when the story stopped being about one terrible afternoon. A former employee described an unofficial color system my sister had used for clients she considered undesirable. Another said staff had been pushed to sell unnecessary financial products to older customers who trusted the bank. Wealthy clients were moved to the front. Complaints were softened into service misunderstandings. Employees who objected were given poor schedules, denied promotions, or encouraged to leave. An older veteran told a reporter that security had once asked him to leave because his coat was torn and he looked homeless. A young military widow said an employee had refused to treat her survivor benefit as legitimate income until she brought in the same documents 3 times. Each account was different. The pattern was not. People later asked how my sister had been allowed to behave that way for so long. The answer was not that no one knew. The answer was that many people knew a little, and each decided that little was not enough to risk a paycheck, a promotion, or a quiet life. One person had seen a client humiliated, another had watched a complaint disappear, someone else had heard my sister threaten an employee. Each person carried one piece. No one wanted to admit what the pieces formed together. I kept thinking about how easily my own story could have ended differently. What if I had not been a colonel? What if the chief executive had not been scheduled to meet me? What if the check had not been connected to a major program? What if the teller had not saved the scan? What if there had been no camera? The most frightening part was not that the system had failed me. It was that the system corrected itself only after learning I had enough power to hurt it back. Most people do not carry that kind of leverage. They have a paycheck, a rent payment, or a child beside them. They should not need rank, money, or public attention before anyone treats them fairly. I sent a formal notice pausing the bank's review. I required an independent investigation, protection for whistleblowers, and a written ban on retaliation against the teller and every employee who cooperated. I asked for years of complaint data to be released. I also told the chief executive not to contact me privately to negotiate around the process. I did not ask for the bank to be destroyed. Thousands of employees had done nothing wrong. Ordinary customers depended on their accounts. Retirement funds and family savings could not become collateral damage in a fight over my sister. My goal was not to burn everything down. It was to stop the people in charge from pretending one firing could repair a culture they had allowed to grow. Several weeks later, the findings produced consequences. My sister was terminated. The head of security lost his position and his license was placed under review. The false emergency report and destruction of the check were referred to prosecutors. The young teller returned to work with written protection against retaliation. Several regional managers were disciplined for ignoring earlier complaints. None of it felt like victory. It felt like a building finally admitting that the cracks had been there long before part of the ceiling fell. A few days after her termination, my sister sent one message. I need to see you. Not as a bank manager, as your sister. I read it 3 times. Then I agreed to meet her once, not because I believed she had changed, but because some doors must be closed while both people are still standing on opposite sides of them. We chose a small roadside diner our parents used to take us to when we were children. The place had not changed much. The booths were still covered in red vinyl. A waitress moved between tables with a glass coffee pot, filling cups before anyone asked. Forks touched plates. Ice dropped into metal bins behind the counter. There were no bank employees, no attorneys, no cameras pointed at us. For the first time in years, my sister had nowhere to hide behind a title. She was already sitting in the back booth when I arrived. She wore a plain sweater and dark pants. Her makeup was lighter than usual, and the skin beneath her eyes looked gray from lack of sleep. She did not sound like a branch manager when she greeted me. She sounded tired. I reminded myself that exhaustion was not the same thing as remorse. There is a difference between suffering because you hurt someone and suffering because your choices finally hurt you. I sat across from her and ordered coffee. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she wrapped both hands around her cup. I'm sorry things got out of control. The sentence was careful, almost practiced. It did not name what she had done. It turned her choices into something that had simply happened around her. Apologies built around the phrase things got out of control often hide the person who kept pushing everything there. I looked at her. Which part was out of your control? She lowered her eyes. Refusing to verify the check? Threatening your employee? Tearing it? Calling me armed? Or ordering someone to take my son? She said nothing. The waitress returned and filled my cup. Neither of us touched the coffee until she had walked away. My sister finally whispered that she had been angry. She said seeing the check had made her feel as though life was laughing at her. For years, she had believed she was the successful one. She had the office, the clothes, the clients who knew her name. I was the sister who moved often, wore old jackets, and never seemed interested in proving anything. Then I walked into her bank carrying proof that the story she had told herself about me was wrong. She admitted that she had been afraid her employees would see it too. She could not bear the thought of apologizing in front of them. She said she had torn the check because she wanted me to leave. She never imagined the situation would become public. I listened until she finished. "You keep describing the consequences as if they were the harm," I said. "The harm happened before anyone knew who I was." She looked at me then. "We're still sisters." I had known those words were coming. Blood made us related. What you did showed me we were never family. Her face tightened. I did not say it to punish her. I said it because I finally understood something I had avoided for years. Family does not require perfection, it requires safety. My son was not safe around you, neither was I. She began to cry. Then she asked me to call the chief executive. She wanted me to say the incident had been a private family misunderstanding. She asked me to tell reporters to move on and to help reduce whatever legal consequences might follow. Even then, part of her apology was still a request. I told her I would not interfere with the investigation. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not restore access to my son. She covered her mouth and looked toward the window. I remembered another version of her. The sister who once split the last piece of pie with me when we were children. The girl who sat beside me during storms because she knew thunder frightened me. Walking away from someone toxic does not erase the years when they were not toxic. That is why the right decision can still feel like grief. I paid for my coffee. She remained in the booth while I left. I did not feel victorious. I felt lighter and sadder at the same time. When I reached home, a thick envelope was waiting near my front door. Inside was a settlement offer from the bank. The amount was large. The confidentiality agreement was larger. My sister had tried to silence me with fear. The bank was about to discover whether it could silence me with money. The settlement offer covered my son's medical care, counseling, missed work, legal costs, and the expense of replacing the check. The payment itself was substantial, but I did not object to compensation. Independence does not mean refusing what is rightfully owed. He still flinched when someone in a uniform moved too quickly near him. But the offer came with conditions. I would not speak publicly about the incident. I would not assist other witnesses. I would not discuss the investigation or criticize the bank's culture. Money can repair certain losses. It can pay for therapy, missed work, and legal help. What it cannot be allowed to purchase is the disappearance of a pattern that may hurt someone else tomorrow. I rejected the silence agreement and sent the bank my terms. The program would not move forward unless the bank hired an independent firm to investigate past complaints and published a summary. Employees needed a reporting line outside branch management and protection from retaliation. I required training on bias, veterans, disability, and vulnerable customers. Security procedures involving children had to be rewritten. The bank also needed regular audits, not one public relations seminar followed by old habits. I asked for a dedicated service program for military families and permanent support for the scholarship fund. I did not demand that the young teller be promoted. I asked that her actions be reviewed fairly and placed in her record. The chief executive met with me after the board accepted the review. He admitted that complaint data had reached senior leadership before. The board had focused on revenue and treated each case as a local problem. We treated complaints as a public relations problem instead of evidence, he said. Then your reforms must be measured by behavior, not press releases. Several months later, my son and I returned to complete the fund account. I wore the same faded jacket. Not to test anyone, it was still my jacket. My son carried the same backpack. The crooked superhero remained on the front. The branch was different, though not perfect. Customers were greeted in order. The complaint process was posted near the entrance. Information for military families stood beside the service desk. A private room had been set aside for customers needing extra support. Some employees looked nervous when they recognized me. I could live with nervous. They followed the process. The young teller met us near the counter. She had received an operations oversight role. She thanked me for protecting her job. You protected the truth before anyone protected you. She admitted that she wished she had spoken sooner. Courage is not measured by whether you were afraid. It is measured by what you saved while you were. The image she saved had carried the truth when nearly everyone else stepped away. We completed the account without ceremony. No one offered special coffee. No one rushed to shake my hand. That felt right. Outside, the glass doors closed behind us. This time, the sound did not feel like a lock. My son took my hand as we crossed the parking lot. Do they respect you now because they know you are a colonel? Some of them probably do, but they should have respected us before they knew. He thought about that. Then what changed? I looked back at the bank. They learned that power comes with consequences. I hope someday they learn dignity should not require consequences at all. My sister believed power meant controlling a room. The bank believed power meant controlling money. I had spent most of my life learning something different. Real power is the ability to punish someone who hurt you, and the discipline to use that power to protect whoever might be hurt next. I had value before I entered that bank. I had value before the check was confirmed. I had value even when my sister refused to see it. Ending that relationship did not take my family away. It protected the family I was building with my son. What do you think about her decision? Would you have handled anything differently if you had been in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your perspective always matters. If this story gave you something to think about, please leave a like, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe so you do not miss the stories still to come. Until we meet again in the next story. We are Honor Family Radio, sharing stories that help us move through the years together, rediscover peace, and find strength within ourselves.